Thank you so much for joining our webinar today, Multisyllabic Word Identification Across the Disciplines. I'm Linda Gutlone, co-author of Word ID, Assessment Across the Content Areas. My co-author, Frances Besselou, is unable to be here today. If you have any questions or comments during the webinar, please put them in the questions pane to the right of your screen. I'll answer questions after the 20-minute presentation. For years, Frances and I have been committed to helping teachers improve students' literacy skills, but we've approached it from different angles. Frances's work has centered on providing professional development to secondary schools across the country. She's been a secondary special education teacher and district administrator. My work has centered on developing educational materials and resources for teachers, such as the Teaching Reading Sourcebook. I began my career in education as an elementary teacher and language arts consultant. We both believe that reading is the most important skill our students can learn in school. It's the foundation for understanding all other academic subjects. Today, a disproportionate number of secondary students are reading below grade level. There's a good chance that some of these students are struggling with decoding multisyllabic words, a skill they should have mastered in elementary school. Unfortunately, reading instruction is still thought of as an elementary teacher's job. Because secondary students spend most of the school day with content area teachers must all share the responsibility for improving students' proficiency in reading. I'll start with the prevalence of multisyllabic words in disciplinary text, English language arts, math, science, and social studies. From 5th grade on, it's estimated that most of the new words that students encounter in text are multisyllabic. Here's an example of a very long sentence that can be found in a science textbook. Out of the 28 words in this sentence, 14 or 50% of them are multisyllabic. Think about it. If you couldn't read the multisyllabic words in this sentence, would you be able to comprehend what it says? You can see that in this sentence, multisyllabic words are entirely responsible for understanding the meaning of the text. The short-term consequences of not being able to read multisyllabic words are obvious. The reader is unable to understand the vocabulary in a passage and equally unable to extract meaning from what's being read. No comprehension strategies are powerful enough to compensate for not being able to read the words within the text. In short, decoding multisyllabic words is critical to success in reading disciplinary texts in middle and high school. Charles Perfetti's reading skill triangle shows the interconnected components that make up general reading skill. These three critical components are word identification, or decoding, vocabulary, and comprehension. Word identification skills affect vocabulary because accurate pronunciation of a word provides access to the word's meaning if the word is in the reader's oral vocabulary. Vocabulary affects decoding because decoding a word whose meaning is known strengthens the connection between the word's written form, or spelling, and its meaning. Comprehension is dependent on vocabulary knowledge or knowing the meanings of the words being read. A reader's ability to access the meaning of a word when it's encountered in text is critical for comprehension. Note that the triangle does not show arrows between word identification and comprehension in either direction. To comprehend text, students need both fluent word identification skills and an average or greater vocabulary. Decoding a word without understanding its meaning will not aid comprehension, nor will overall comprehension necessarily aid in decoding a specific word. Word identification is a critical skill in the reading triangle because both comprehension and vocabulary rely on it. Prevalence of multisyllabic words extends to assessment items as well. Even when concepts have been mastered, students' limited word identification skills can interfere with their ability to demonstrate the knowledge that they actually do possess. Teachers generally assume that when students fail to select the correct answer on a content area test, it's due to their lack of content area knowledge. However, the failure may be due instead to students' difficulty in decoding or identifying the multisyllabic words included in a given test item. Not only does a student have to be able to select the correct answer in this test item, but the student also must be able to read and understand all of the multisyllabic words in both the question and answer choices. We all know that educators are prone to inventing new terminology, new buzzwords. Disciplinary literacy, a relatively new term, should not be confused with content area literacy. According to the Shanahans, disciplinary literacy is different from content area literacy in a couple of major ways. Content area literacy relates to reading across the disciplines using generalizable skills and strategies that can be used in all or most reading. Examples of content area literacy skills include decoding multisyllabic words and summarizing. These skills and strategies are generally applicable across the disciplines. Disciplinary literacy relates to reading in one specific discipline, using specialized skills and strategies that consider the learning demands of that content area or discipline. Disciplinary literacy is based on the idea that literacy demands on students are unique, depending on the discipline they're studying. Examples of disciplinary literacy skills include identifying Greek combining forms that occur frequently in science textbooks, such as ology or bio, and understanding literacy devices, such as alliteration or analogy in language arts. The Common Core State Standards for Reading outline a set of foundational reading acquisition skills designed to develop proficient readers with the capacity to comprehend varied texts across a range of disciplines. According to the Common Core, students are expected to have mastered reading multisyllabic words by grades 4 or 5. The foundational skills standard reads, use combined knowledge of all sound spelling correspondences, syllabication patterns, and morphology to read accurately unfamiliar multisyllabic words in context and out of context. By middle school, proficient readers have acquired skills needed to identify multisyllabic words automatically. They no longer sound out these long words letter by letter or sound by sound, but instead use larger multi-letter units or chunks that recur across different words. These chunks or patterns may be syllables or morphemes. Proficient readers first look for familiar morphemes or word parts and then make decisions based on familiar syllable patterns. Only when readers have applied these strategies do they use phonics or sound spelling correspondences. Syllable patterns include syllable divisions, for example, VC, CV, or V, CV, and syllable types, for example, open or closed. Knowing familiar morpheme patterns helps in decoding multisyllabic words. The multisyllabic words in disciplinary texts are morphemically complex, meaning that they consist of various morphemes such as prefixes, suffixes, and roots. The relationships between single sounds, phonemes, and the spellings, graphemes, used to represent them are referred to as sound-spelling correspondences. For example, the sound spelled PH, as in the word phonics. According to the Common Core, students should master common sound spellings by the end of 2nd grade. According to our recent morpheme frequency study, the occurrence of morphemes, or word parts, vary by content area. This table shows the prefixes that appear to be strong candidates for word ID assessment and instruction in each content area. Prefixes con, d, in, and re appear consistently across the content areas, but prefixes com, ex, pro, and trans do not. The results of our analysis show that as academic languages specialize per discipline or content area, so is the occurrence of prefixes. This is important information. There isn't enough time in the day for teachers to teach everything. They need to prioritize by focusing on content and skills that have the most leverage and endurance. This table shows the derivational suffixes that appear to be strong candidates for word ID assessment and instruction in each content area. Derivational suffixes al, ation, ik, and shun appear consistently across the content areas, but derivational suffixes a, ism, ity, and iv do not. The results of our analysis show that as academic languages specialize per discipline or content area, so is the occurrence of derivational suffixes. Most strikingly different is the frequency of occurrence of Greek combining forms or roots across the content areas. Except for the Greek combining form logi or ology, assessment and instruction in Greek combining forms is pretty much discipline specific. For example, a science teacher might want to introduce the Greek combining form bio, as in biologist or biosphere. But knowing bio would not be as useful in math. A math teacher might want to introduce the Greek combining form gon, as in hexagon or octagon. Like prefixes and derivational suffixes, Greek combining forms don't occur with the same frequency across the disciplines or content areas, clearly showing why content area teachers must all share the responsibility for teaching morphemes. Based on current NAEP reading scores, it appears that a large number of secondary students have major gaps in basic foundational reading skills. Although there are many assessments for secondary teachers to choose from if they wish to measure students' proficiency in vocabulary or comprehension, word identification skills are generally overlooked at the secondary level. I guess it's convenient to assume that students mastered these skills in the earlier grades. Surprisingly, Francis and I discovered that there were no specific formative assessments that secondary content area teachers could quickly and easily use to identify students who would benefit from instruction in multisyllabic word identification. We agree with the LINCS website that published word analysis assessments do not always include enough multisyllabic words to evaluate how well learners can chunk word parts. Let's briefly compare two types of commonly used assessment, formative and summative. Formative assessment is assessment for learning, while summative assessment is assessment of learning. Formative assessment gives students the chance to improve upon their learning, such as by guiding instruction during the school year, while summative assessment gives students the chance to prove what they have learned, such as by taking an exam at the end of the school year. Educators like Joe Torgeson believe that improving adolescent literacy instruction greatly depends on improving the formative assessments needed to guide that instruction. Francis and I discovered that secondary content area teachers desperately needed easy-to-use formative assessments to help them identify or verify students who have gaps in multisyllabic word identification skills. So we spent the last couple years researching, developing, writing, and field testing these assessments. Here are our basic design criteria. The formative assessment should target multisyllabic academic words in each content area, target frequent morphemes in each content area, align with the same multisyllabic word structure, scope, and sequence, share the same format, and be quick to administer. The Word ID three-step formative assessment system is designed to collect comprehensive and actionable data to identify and verify secondary students whose word identification skills are sufficient for reading multisyllabic words in disciplinary texts. It's also designed to pinpoint secondary students who would benefit from its strategic or intensive intervention in multisyllabic word identification skills. Here's how it works. The maze measure is a paper and pencil multiple choice closed task that students complete while silently reading a short biographical passage. This whole class screener takes about 3 to 5 minutes to administer. The maze measure determines who continues without support and identifies those who may be at risk of failure. If a student fails the maze measure, then you administer the 2020 screener. The 2020 screener confirms the results of the maze measure. It's an individually administered word reading task that consists of 2 oral reading subtests, terms and names, each of which has 20 items. 2020. This screener takes about 3 to 5 minutes per student to administer. The 2020 screener identifies whether or not a student requires additional diagnostic assessment. If a student fails the 2020 screener, then you administer the 360 diagnostic exam. The 360 diagnostic exam validates the outcome of the 2020 screener and, like the 2020 screener, consists of 2 oral reading subtests, terms and names. The diagnostic exam takes about 6 to 8 minutes per student to administer. The 360 is designed to pinpoint a student's specific area of weakness in multisyllabic word identification. A handy instructional decision-making tool, the 360 Instructional Snapshot, provides an at-a-glance view of a student's skills. The instructional snapshot is useful in planning appropriate, strategic, or intensive intervention. So here's a different way of looking at the Word ID assessment system. Word ID is divided into 4 content areas: English Language Arts, Math, Science, and Social Studies. For each content area, there are 3 discipline-specific Word ID formative assessments: Maze Measure, 2020 Screener, and 360 Diagnostic Exam. That makes 12 discipline-specific word identification assessments in all. Thank you again for joining the webinar. And by the way, I'm the author on the left, Frances is on the right. You can learn more about Word ID assessment across the content areas by visiting our website, www.wordidassessment.com. Now I'll answer any questions.